Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Ashish. I'm here today to talk about some of the latest innovations we have built, PayPal Agentic Ready APIs and services. So today, I, along with Suprema and Ed, are going to explain something truly revolutionizing the PayPal Agent Toolkit. So let's understand what is PayPal Agent Toolkit and how it will help you to empower your intelligent applications. So let's consider you as a builder, developer, building a omni-commerce solutions. Now, what are some of the key tasks, key challenges, what you do? So imagine you are building a system for an end-to-end subscription. You are generating an invoice. You are creating a payment link. So all of this sounds like a simple task. But behind the scene, as a developer, you have to understand what all these APIs entails to. How can you integrate with the code? So now the shopper needs are unique. It changes as per their preferences because this landscape is rapidly shifting. So how do we as a developer can help shoppers to see all of these unique needs available in our commerce applications? Now, manually building all of these integrations will require significant effort as well as a maintenance overhead, and which will essentially slow down your development process. So what if we have an intelligent agent available? What if I can simplify the integration activities for you? And that's the power of the agentic solution. So let's consider the agentic capabilities, what we have built out in PayPal. So in the screen, you can see in the left side, without agent capability. So these are all the complex code and the logic you want to start with when you are integrating with each APIs, because it requires you to, for each of these integrations, and find out what are those specific needs. Now imagine the world with agent. Now it will simplify significantly the line of code, what you need to write. So this is one line of code where you can go through and integrate with PayPal Agent Toolkit and understand what are all the various capabilities it offers. Now we are excited to introduce PayPal Agent Toolkit. It's a library designed to empower developers to build next-generation commerce experience. So let's understand what are the key pillars, what are the key capabilities we provide as part of Agent Toolkit. The first and foremost, automation. We understand that time is essence when you build with the integration. And that's why we have provided a pre-built set of AI tools which can simplify your workflow. So you can focus truly building the features and without worrying the need of any sort of integrations. Now, in order of building a truly agentic commerce application, you need to aware of the full context what the user provides. Now, this toolkit basically helps you to provide this capability to understand the end-to-end context and give you the solutions for that. Now, the last but not least, the scalability. As your application grow and then you handle complex operations, scalability is crucial. Now, this agentic toolkit helps you to handle complex operations faster and at scale, leveraging the PayPal robust infrastructure and the trusted network. So in essence, the PayPal Agent Toolkit helps you to build smarter, faster, and intelligent workflows without the need of having a complex integrations. And now I'll request Suprema to come over and explain all of those capabilities, what we give in the Agent Toolkit, and how it can transform your integration journey. Over to you, Suprema.
Thanks, Ashish. We have to build a commerce solution with the Agent Toolkit. Now, it can be anything. It can be a website, it can be a chatbot, it can be a mobile app, any way in which we can do integration for the merchant. I'm going to walk you through what are the steps involved in a general e-commerce context. So in any e-commerce, you would need to have an order placed, which is done through an orders API. Then you would have subscription management. You would want your customers to keep coming back to you again and again. And this is typically handled by the subscriptions API. Then we'll also have to place large custom orders to manage your special clients. This will be handled typically by an invoicing API. And you would also have the ability to browse various products and to list based on certain preferences. And that is a product catalog API. Now, in general, when you want to integrate for each of these functionalities to provide use cases for your merchants, what you would do is to go through each of these APIs, look at their request structures, look at their response structures, and see how complex it is. And typically, nowadays, most of these APIs are RESTful, so they don't have state. So you will need to actually maintain context in between each of these API calls, pull out the right values, translate it to the other API's requirement, and manage everything on your own. Now let's see how all of this is simplified by using the Agent Toolkit. Now, let's go with a basic use case of the customer wants to place an order. In this case, you would see that the customer, this is an example of a chat scenario, but ideally, you would get the intent that the customer wants to place an order from anywhere. And in the chat, they say that they want to place a specific order. And how you would do it with a toolkit is essentially say, hey, generate an order for a specific product for a specific price. And as you can see, this is natural language processing. This has been the main theme of the talks that you've had prior also, that you don't need to go through complex request-response structures. You can use English, and AI being context-aware, being aware of how to process natural language requests, and also aware of how to process your intent, can actually translate it and use the right tools to get what you actually need. And in this context, you would just say, hey, get the tools. If you can look at the code, it actually just says get tools. It doesn't say which tools to use. But in the PayPal toolkit, we offer multiple tools that offer order processing capabilities, and LLM orchestrates the call between the create order, the get order, and the payment of the order. And how these tools all work together is planned as part of its plan execute steps, and more of that would be spoken about in the architecture slide. Ed would be here to talk about it. Let's go on to another use case where the customer wants to actually enroll in a subscription. Now, this is a use case that a lot of people want. They don't want the customer shopping just one time. They want the customer to come back and shop again and again for a product. And we make it actually absolutely easy. If you could see, it's exact same as the order call. Just the prompt that you give actually changes, and you'd say, hey, enroll in a subscription. And for this specific use case, for this specific subscription plan. Now, if you can look at the chat, the customer says, hey, use the same card as I did last time. Now, based on the user's preferences, we in PayPal know that the user has a specific funding instrument that they prefer all the time. And without actually getting any sort of funding instrument directly from the user in the context of the call, we are able to know which card to use, and we are able to make a payment against that card for this particular transaction. Now, so you have a confirmation. You have a delivery date by Friday. Let's go on to the next use case. The customer actually wants to place a large custom order. Here, they're planning a tech conference, and they're going to have hundreds of attendees, and they are going to have the merchant supply coffee for all the attendees. So in this case, because it's a tech conference and they haven't done this in quite some time, they may not be aware of how much to order from a merchant. Now, AI, having the context from other similar tech conferences in the area, what the attendees would prefer to have as beverages, can say, hey, for about 100 people and over a course of 3 days, how much would be required? AI would be able to say, hey, based on your prior information and the other transactions that merchant has had before, it will recommend you need 15 gallons of brewed coffee, and it can be delivered to you, and it needs to be compostable because we're all environment friendly. So we'd have the customized order in this case, and we'd send the invoice to a particular email. Now, in this case, we ask for the email because it may be different from the regular customer's email. This is done as part of an organization. And so we receive the email, and we create an invoice. Again, simple text, simple input. And we orchestrate the creation of the invoice, the retrieval of the invoice specific information. And we send the invoice to the particular email address so that whenever they're ready, they would be able to make a payment. And last, the customer can come back and say, hey, I love the cold brew offering that you had last week. Do you have any more right now? And we say, hey, yes, we have a new cold brew collection. And they're going to recommend the latest available collection. Here, if you actually see, show all products that are categorized as cold brew. Now, here is where the power of AI can actually come in more than just simplifying the request and response. So in the context, we know that the customer likes cold brew. We already have that information based on purchase history, customer knowledge. Merchant knows the customer very well. Now, I've been ordering coffee for like ages with this merchant. Now, imagine this scenario. If the customer wanted to place an order for the conference, they did the subscription and the invoicing before for the conference. Imagine if the AI can say, hey, a lot of your tech conference attendees are going to be health conscious. What if we add a green tea sampler or a herbal tea sampler? You could do your product promotion. Right now, you wouldn't have enough context to offer such a convertible marketing capability based on the products that you already share with your customer. But with AI, you not only have the history of the customer, the history of the merchant use cases based on other customers, you also have the context that LLM can add into this mix. And it adds a whole new layer to the customer interaction and the relationship that you have with the customer as part of this. And again, all of these toolkits and more we are offering as part of the Agent Toolkit. We'll have most of these functionalities today, and we'll release more functionality in the future. But to integrate with all of this, there's just a few basic steps that need to be followed. The first thing would be configuring the LLM. Now, this can vary depending on which LLM you choose, and your LLM of choice can vary depending on your need. Various LLMs offer various functionality, but the integration would be very similar. You would need an API key, you would need a URL, you would need other custom configurations, you will need to authenticate with the LLM. But once you actually get an LLM configuration, you would need to define the agent invocation saying, hey, as an agent, you are going to help me do this as part of the merchant commerce solution. And say, hey, you're going to be doing orders, scheduling services, you're going to be processing invoices, you're going to be processing returns, you're also going to be handling dispute management. And to use all of this, we are going to configure the system message, and we are going to configure the tools. Use PayPal Toolkit to do all of this functionality in the context of the customers. And here, if you see, we not only load the system prompt, we also load the history of the user messages. This is where you could actually enrich the interaction with the users. You could as well have only one message coming in, or you could have a history of the user's interaction to say, hey, this is how the user's preferences have changed over time or over context, and you could use that to make a decision on what parameters to invoke the tools with. And of course, you have the tools, all the typical tools. Like Vikram mentioned in the earlier talk, our tools are well-defined, and they have certain parameters that they're going to be invoked with. And the LLM is pretty aware, based on the intent of the user, of which tool to invoke at what time. Then you just make the call, process the response. This is business as usual. And that's about it. So this is the framework of the calls that you need to make. And irrespective of the LLM and irrespective of the language, this is all it takes to integrate with the Agent Toolkit. And now let's see how it works. Ed, I invite you to share the architecture of this.
Well, thanks, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about going beyond some of the chat interfaces that we've already been seeing so often in this. And obviously, chat is a very natural way to communicate with an LLM and to be able to get things done that you want to get done. But in reality, this whole model doesn't rely specifically on chat. It can be used in a variety of other ways. Importantly, our shoppers today are currently using mobile apps, points of sale applications, and online stores for processing their transactions. So we can evolve a system that will use LLMs under the covers in our agentic toolkits to be able to support those omni-commerce platforms that already exist today. So in this case, Shopper is coming into a standard omnicommerce platform, but that system, instead of all of the code that was written to orchestrate a payment, to be able to call all of the various different integrations and the APIs that are out there, it's using this LLM orchestration model. The agent, which is what that LLM orchestration is going to look at all of the tools that are available for it. It's going to plan how it wants to execute its intent from the buyer. It does the execution of that, gets the response, and then reflects upon that. And it can do that multiple times based upon the feedback that does come back. Behind that, the variety of tools that are available include the PayPal Agent Toolkit. The PayPal Agent Toolkit, which supports a variety of our APIs, like the Orders API, subscriptions, invoices. But then it can also involve a variety of other toolkits. Logistics toolkits for tracking and package tracking and shipping, data access, notifications. All of that can sort of be included together, provided to the LLM, and the LLM will determine the right course of action based upon the buyer's intent. Let's dig in a little bit more into a specific flow, a pretty standard integration for an e-commerce platform. A shopper is maybe using their mobile application, and they click a button. The button click is an intent to initiate a purchase. So the intent to initiate the purchase comes into the platform, and that agent then interprets the intent. And it says, hey, I have some tools available to me to initiate that purchase. One of the tools being the PayPal Agentic Toolkit, creating an order. So it's going to tell the Agentic Toolkit to create that order. And from there, the toolkit's going to call the APIs on the PayPal side, figure out exactly what it needs to do to get that order ID back. And it gets a payment link back with that as well. Sends that back to the agent, back through the platform, and all the way back to the shopper. Shopper now is following a sort of standard checkout, PayPal checkout flow. They click on a button. They end up going through a PayPal checkout experience. They approve their payment within PayPal. And then once that's completed, there's a webhook that can go back to that agent toolkit or to the agent itself. So the agent toolkit then sees that this was completed. So it sees that this order was approved. And now it can make determinations on what it should do next. So in this case, it sees, oh, I should send an email to notify the buyer that they completed their payment. At that point, email is sent off to the buyer, and everything looks good. And taking this a little bit farther, I think all of that shows how we can update an existing, pretty traditional e-commerce platform to use agents to be able to orchestrate all of that hard work that you've had to do behind the scenes. But it can do more, right? Now that we have an AI agent in place, we can provide enhanced experiences for our shoppers. One of which is that if a shopper is viewing item details, we could be context aware about who that shopper is, and we could take those details, the description of the product, and we can sort of fine-tune that, highlight certain aspects of it that are more appropriate to this shopper. That's going to help that shopper determine, do I actually want to buy this product? In this case, the buyer does want to buy that product, so they initiate that purchase. And that sends another message to the agent, and the agent is using that to calculate the tax and shipping. It's doing that order processing that we discussed previously. It's returning that payment link. Now, when the buyer completes that payment, on the return of that, there's even more that can actually happen here. So, here we're saying we've got a webhook notification that the buyer has approved an order with PayPal, but now the agent can determine what it wants to do next. And in this case, it needs to go ship that product. So it's reaching out to another agent within the system and using the tools that are within the logistics toolkit to go get tracking information or to be able to create the shipping information that's required there. And the agent then can use the result of that to also notify PayPal via the PayPal toolkit that the order was was shipped, and here's the tracking information associated with that. So a really complex workflow that buyers today need to go through, or that developers today need to go through and manually code and figure out exactly how do we want to make this all work. And now with these toolkits, we can basically provide the tools to the agent, express the intents to the agents in specific ways, and then let the agent figure out how exactly that integration needs to occur. So some of the key takeaways that we want you to take from this session. Number one, this is using a natural language interface. So for developers, this simplifies the process for you to develop against these. What that means is that you can define those integration requirements conversationally, and you can simplify that. What it also means is that that natural language interface is the way that you are defining the requirements for this system. Those prompts themselves have a lot of control over what's going to happen. So getting the prompts right is very important here. This also means that you as a developer can spend less time on all of the overhead of figuring out those API calls. And instead, you could just express the intent and inform the agents of how it should actually do this work, giving you more time to focus on the most important business features that you need to provide. And once you've included one of these toolkits, as the toolkits continue to evolve, that will enable you to take advantage of some of the other functionality that's provided. So for example, what Suprema showed earlier is that if you're doing a traditional integration using the Orders API, you can also then start to take advantage of the subscriptions. And you could do that in such a way where you can play with it, try things out, which really gets to the second to last piece here, which is that rapid prototyping. I think agents really make it easy for you to experiment and try new things, and experiment with a lot of the different APIs and services that PayPal provides. It's a great way to get things in the hands of customers as quickly as possible. And very importantly, especially for all of the developers in the room, this does allow for reducing technical debt. What we can do is we can separate the concerns. The toolkit itself is the thing that is integrating with PayPal. You are writing prompts. You are writing the sort of conversational aspects of this to integrate with the toolkit. So that separation of concerns means that you can really focus on getting the prompts right, and we'll focus on getting the rest of the integration correct. So we invite you to build the future of commerce with the PayPal Agent Toolkit. PayPal Agent Toolkit is available today. It's available on a variety of languages. We support TypeScript, and we support Python today. And you can check this out by going to paypal.ai. And with that, we have a few minutes left, so we're going to open this up for questions as well. And I'm going to invite my co-presenters onto the stage. If you have questions, please raise your hand, and my colleague Anuj will bring the microphone to you.
All right.
Hello, my name is Harsh. Amazing presentation. Thank you for that. My question is more around the cost of infrastructure. Do you see that going up? Earlier, we were only worried about CPU and memory, but now we are talking about agents, and either we use something like Claude, ChatGPT, that's pay-per-use kind of a subscription model, or if you want to run your models on premises or on your own infrastructure, then you have to get these specialized GPUs. So what's your take on the overall cost for running your application? How would that change with this agentic approach?
Yeah, great question. You guys want to?
I can, yeah.
Just start that one.
Yeah, so unlike the MCP demos, this really doesn't need to run on a cloud desktop. The way the agent builds, it is on the merchant server. So if you're actually already using LLM for other functionality, for aggregating other things on the merchant, you could easily plug this in on the merchant side. As opposed to the cost, most of the LLMs offer usage-based cost. So that would pretty much, for an integration perspective, free trial would be good enough to try out the integration, and once you're good with the prototyping, fix your prompts and kind of just go forward from there. But really, if you're looking to use an LLM just for integrating this agent toolkit, that might not offer as much capabilities as AIs can today offer. We are moving into a world where everything is going to be orchestrated through an AI agent. So I would consider it as a worthy investment, and you would look at it as an investment for future building of the business, is what I would say.
So if I may add to that, so I think we're going to get to a point where, as you design your application, you have to make some decisions, which is if you want to move with like an API implementation, or you want to go with LLM. So this is basically will drive some of those cost, decisions that you're gonna make. So if you decide to go with an API, maybe that's cheaper for a straightforward problem. And also, if you want to go with LLM, maybe that would be more advanced problem that you want to solve. So you have to make that distinction between the two, and as you decide on it. The other thing, this is just a prediction from my side. I think as the LLM evolve itself, it's gonna also be cost aware, and then it will make the decisions on when to use APIs and when to use like MCP servers when it makes sense. I hope that would answer your questions. But great question. Thank you.
And I'm going to add just one tiny bit to that. I think one of the things that, obviously this space is evolving pretty quickly. One of the things that I have seen is that there are certain use cases where that plan execute phase, the planning phase of that can be cached, essentially. You can have mechanisms in place where it can use the same plan to execute multiple times. So I suspect that over a period of time, we'll start to see some of those cost improvements, especially if it's a workflow that is fairly deterministic or something where the intent is pretty easy to understand and to create a plan out of that.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It was really great. I had some concerns that when the LLM that you are using, it is going to communicate in the details with the microservices, like getting the invoices, getting the billing address, and all those related things. But as we know, like these details are encrypted when we are storing it in the database. So when we get these details, they are also encrypted. So how the AI is going to know that, how it is going to like de-encrypt these data? How are you, what is the security pain point that you are facing when you developed this product, and how did you overcome it?
That is a great question. I also, a plug for the prior session, just to ours. That session was around the MCP servers. And a lot of the best practices for how to build agents, and considering security, considering some of the best practices for evolving your integrations. I think my colleague Nitin covered a lot of that in there, so I definitely recommend when you have the opportunity, these should be posted on YouTube. You should be able to see some of that. I think so. Specifically to your question, do you mind repeating just one more time? I want to just make sure that I'm getting the rest of this accurate.
Yes, the main question is like, did you encounter any pain points related to security, and how did you overcome it?
OK, great. So from a security perspective, the Agent Toolkit is communicating directly to all of our APIs. So what the Agent Toolkit is really doing is just providing a different integration pattern to a pretty standard API integration behind the scenes. So fundamentally, from the point in which you are communicating with the agent toolkit to the time that it reaches and is communicating with the PayPal servers, that's going to be a request over HTTPS. The request is going to be using your client ID and secret, the merchant credentials that are provided to the toolkit to be able to make those calls. The consideration of the LLM on top of that is sort of separate from the rest of that functionality. That being said, there are best practices around providing data to the LLM of what is going to be PII, what should be encrypted while you are communicating. So all of that can be implemented as part of the framework that you're using for building your agents. Do you have any other things to add to that, Suprema? I know you spent a lot of time on these as well.
No, pretty much the same. So from the data that goes into LLM, right now, the tools that we have exposed, we have sanitized it to a point where it's the ones that we are already exposing at a public level to the merchants. So for future data, all the PII masking and all of that would come into picture. And in terms of the unauthorized data accidentally leaking in, it still goes through all of our access control mechanisms, all of our risk vetting mechanisms, and we do work with REST APIs on our side, so it is an on-need basis and on access basis. So even if you look at the response structure, we don't actually give out all the information that comes as part of the order response. So it is pretty controlled on our side. And this was something that we were talking to earlier. The control systems in place that are required from PayPal as a payment company perspective, the merchant perspective, the user perspective, none of those controls actually change. We still have those control mechanisms in place. It is just the way in which we interact with each other has become more of conversational from prescriptive. So that's the only nature of the things that has changed.
So my question is, basically, a lot of agentic applications these days have the issue of memory retaining. So when users are going to interact with the system, throughout the history, there is going to be a long list of memory, right? So how are you going to make sure that the memory fits into the context and you retain the memory that makes actual sense? Because when you summarize the memory, it loses a lot of its context. So have you addressed this issue already, or how are you planning to address it?
I can take that. So the way it happens in LLM is there is an LLM context, and apart from that, there is a PayPal user and PayPal transactional context that we have. The LLM context is the one that you're referring to where LLMs leak memory and all of that. That is on the side of how the LLM manages the session scope and how much of short-term and long-term memory it has on the users. But on the PayPal side, we have a lot of the information on our side that is not actually in the session at the time of the transaction. It comes into play when it actually our APIs are invoked, and it happens on the PayPal ecosystem side. So from that perspective, we don't necessarily burden the LLM with additional context that we are bringing in, and we have kind of siloed that information in terms of context. Sam?
Yeah, and some of that is really about the best practices on how you're going to use the agentic tool itself. So the more that you add as your prompts, the more history that you would have, it's going to become more complicated for the LLM to help you with your answers as well. So some of the the best practices has been recommended that you would go with more shorter and a smaller context for what you want, and that would help you to avoid that long processing for your that data, and would give you more accurate answers as well.
So my question is when LLMs hallucinate, they many a times make mistakes, right? So when they make mistakes, you should penalize them, and when they make correct decisions, you should incentivize them. So this mechanism of incentivization and penalization works in reinforcement learning. But how do you implement that in LLMs where they are black boxes? So have you built something on top of the LLMs that does it?
So in our case, we are open for all LLMs. Like it does not really matter like if you implemented your own, if you are using DeepSeek, OpenAI, whatever tool that you are using, we are opening our services to all of those. So we don't have we don't work on incentivizing them or giving them any benefit of that. It's just really making sure that the service is available across the board. So what we are trying to do here, which is really just to make it simpler for you to integrate with our services. So you could go with the API route. You can build your own integration, or you can go with the agentic. The LLM model here just really exists to help you to simplify that integration process. So instead of going writing a longer code to get this integration done, you are just basically shortening that code. And also, if the API is secure, to the earlier point, then your LLM integration would be secure, because we are looking at the agent as another developer in this case. So you are really just coming as an agentic developer, and you are integrating with our service. So yeah, cool. All right.
And I think to the point of hallucinations, obviously there's plenty of questions and concerns around this. I think the important piece to remember is that in a traditional PayPal transaction, it's a three-party model. Typically, you have a merchant, you have a shopper, and you have PayPal. Each one of those pieces needs to have some level of controls in place throughout this transaction to make sure that the process is working as expected. And so from a PayPal perspective, right, we have a variety of controls already in place in our system to provide secure payments. That involves risk, that involves information about the users, all of those different pieces exist. It's important then that our merchants and our partners are also providing their own level of controls, and customers also need to be able to see the transactions that are occurring. So when a buyer is interacting with PayPal, they see the total transaction amount. They understand who they are paying with. When the merchant is communicating back with the buyer, we expect them to also send the same amount of information, to send the same values back, and then also to validate the final transaction amounts. All pieces in that are very important to this puzzle to create a safe transaction for our buyers, for our merchants, and for us.
Hi. So my question is, in the demo, as you have shown, PayPal.toolkit, which gives all the tools, right? So first question is can we use individual tools instead of whole toolkit just for making a particular request? Second thing is, are these tools asynchronous in nature or synchronous in nature? So in some cases, I would prefer using an asynchronous function, whereas in some cases, I would prefer to use a synchronous function. And how do you rate limit this? So I, as a merchant developer, if you use my API key, there would be multiple calls coming to the PayPal server. But if I want to embed a customer's key, do you have any workaround for that? I mean, workaround in the sense, any easy way to do that?
For the toolkit, yes, you can pick and choose specific tools that you want, and we have instructions on the PayPal.ai to help you do that. And the next, the synchronous and asynchronous stuff. Right now, I believe majority of our tools are synchronous, but where the webhook and everything comes into place, we do support asynchronous tools, and we will be exposing that in the future for enabling asynchronous calls. Sorry, I missed the last part of the question.
The last part was regarding the rate limiting. So if I want to embed a merchant API key, so the rate limiting will be on the merchant API key or the customer?
It will be right now on the merchant side for the rate limiting perspective. For the customer, I don't believe we have implemented yet, but it will be in the work.
Yeah, the reason is I can get number of, let's say a customer is giving hundreds of requests. So should I be implementing the rate limiting for that particular customer, or the toolkit itself handles it?
So the mechanism for invocation is actually on the merchant side. So merchant controls the invocation pattern. So in that sense, if there is a rogue customer on the merchant platform, I would believe the rate limiting systems on the merchant side would kick into picture. Otherwise, we would also have the information from a merchant perspective that a specific client or a specific customer is invoking that calls, and we would also be able to be aware. But right now, I believe only the merchant would be able to take an active action on their side. From our side, we would say, hey, this merchant is being rate limited, would be all the information that we would be able to share with the merchant at that point.
Yes. And I think this is going to be our last question before we end for the day.
Yeah, quick question. Do you have the metrics in terms of turnaround time for agentic versus API, like which is faster or both the same?
With the amount of stress testing that we did not see a significant difference. I don't believe we have any numbers that we have on that.
So it's about in terms of simplifying the integration. So right now we are in an initial phase. We are looking for various metrics, how we are simplifying and what's the amount of simplifications we are doing. So that's more to come for sure.
Ed, one last question for him.
Sounds good.
Well, actually, I just want to say thanks for everyone asking these questions, because it seems like we're all basically trying to figure out whose house it is and where where we are in the house, right, where the walls are. I just have actually maybe a philosophical question. It seems like PayPal is able to do a lot more. That is, I'm in the e-commerce platform business. You all are starting to do a lot of the things that we would like to do. So as you see, you're not getting in the shipping business or anything else, I know, but there's going to be an interplay and a sort of a seizing of functionality, maybe an ebb and flow. How do you see that playing out? This could be the worst last question to end on.
All right. So when we talked about the PayPal commerce platform, the way we are seeing it, we're gonna basically partner with everyone, with all merchants and partners as well from all levels, like small businesses and large businesses and partners as well. And we want to make sure that the service is available to everyone to use. So the way we see it, that we have all of these services available for everyone, and some of those services also powered by our own partners too. So we want to make sure that we kind of give a secure integration when it comes to commerce across all of these different components. So that's basically our goal. That's what we are looking for. So yeah, and thank you. And last year I was presenting in your demo as well, so I appreciate that. Thanks. All right, cool.
That's it.
So, I think that's our last question. We have just a few minutes. I want to invite everybody, if you are interested, please join us in the hackathon. If you have any questions or want to learn a little bit more about some of our agentic AI, or you want to learn about some of the other products that we've offered, please come over and work on something with us. We're happy to help you out. We're happy to answer any questions inside of there. That's going to be taking place right next door, and we're going to be heading that direction now. So thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you all.
Thank you.